The stars were cold and distant, just like they had been for thousands of years. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his patrol ship, watching the empty space through the viewport. He had been doing this job for 15 years now, and nothing ever happened out here in the outer territories. It was boring, peaceful, and exactly what the Galactic Council wanted. Jake was Vraxian, a species known for their blue skin and logical minds. His people had been part of the Council for over 5,000 years. They were proud of their position, proud of the peace they helped maintain across thousands of worlds. "Commander, you should see this," said his second officer, Krell. The reptilian officer was looking at his console with confusion on his scaled face. "We have picked up something strange. A ship, I think. But the readings make no sense." Jake walked over to examine the data. Krell was right. The object was definitely a ship, but it was old. Very old. The hull design did not match any known species in the Council database. The metal was corroded and damaged, floating dead in space like a ghost. Could it be from the old wars? Jake asked. 3,000 years ago, before the current peace, there had been many conflicts between species. Ancient wrecks still turned up sometimes. Maybe, Krell said slowly. But look at these symbols on the hull. The computer is trying to match them with our archives. Jake waited as the computer worked. When the results came back, he felt a chill run down his spine. The symbols matched records from the old archives. Very old archives. The ones that most people thought were just legends and myths. "Human," the computer announced in its flat voice. "Origin Earth circa 3,000 years ago." Krell laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the quiet bridge. "Humans, those primitives from the old stories? The ones who destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons?" "Commander, this must be a mistake," but Jake was not laughing. He had studied history more than most officers. He knew the stories about humans. They were taught to every child in Council space as a warning. Humans were supposed to be aggressive, violent, unable to control their own destructive nature. They had built weapons that could crack planets, and then they had used those weapons on themselves. Earth was now just a dead rock circling a lonely sun. At least that was what the history book said. "Scan that ship completely," Jake ordered. "I want to know everything about it." The scans took several minutes. The ship was definitely human in design. It was military, probably a warship from their final days. The hull showed signs of battle damage, but not from nuclear weapons. These were energy burns, projectile impacts, the kind of damage that came from space combat. "Commander," one of the bridge officers called out, "I am detecting a power source inside that ship. Very faint, but it is there." "That is impossible," Krell said. "That ship is 3,000 years old. Nothing could still have power after all this time." Jake felt uneasy. Something about this situation felt wrong. "Take us closer, but carefully. Raise shields and charge weapons, just in case." "You cannot be serious," Krell protested. "It is a dead ship from a dead species." "Do it," Jake ordered. His crew obeyed, though he could sense their confusion. The patrol ship moved slowly toward the ancient human vessel. It looked peaceful enough, just floating there in the darkness. But Jake could not shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. On the other side of the galaxy, on a remote mining colony called Station 7, a young woman named Sophie Grant was having the worst day of her work life. She was a surveyor, someone who mapped underground caves and mineral deposits. It was hard work, but she liked it. The solitude, the discovery, the feeling that she was finding things no one had seen before. Today, she had found something very unexpected. The cave system she was exploring had taken her deep underground, far deeper than the mining company had authorized. But her scanners had detected unusual readings, and Sophie had never been good at following rules when her curiosity was involved. The chamber she discovered was enormous, carved from solid rock. But it was not natural. The walls were too smooth, too perfect, and in the center of the chamber stood a structure that made her heart race. It was a bunker, sealed with a heavy metal door that bore symbols she did not recognize. The door had a keypad lock, but when Sophie touched it, the system activated on its own. Lights flickered to life, running on some power source that had lasted for millennia. The door opened with a hiss of escaping air. Inside, Sophie found a treasure that would change the galaxy forever. There were computers, still functioning after thousands of years. There were weapons stored in pristine condition. There were records, data files, videos, and audio recordings. And there were bones. Human bones in military uniforms preserved in the dry air of the sealed bunker. Sophie's hands shook as she activated one of the computer terminals. The language on the screen was not one she knew, but her translator device began working immediately. It took a few minutes, but soon she could read the words clearly. They were logs, military logs from a human colony called New Boston. The dates were over 3,000 years old. Sophie began reading, and with each entry her blood ran colder. These humans had not destroyed themselves. They had been attacked. Multiple species working together had struck human colonies across dozens of worlds simultaneously. The attacks had been coordinated, brutal, and efficient. Billions of humans had died in a single day. The logs described desperate defenses, evacuation attempts, ships fleeing into unknown space. They described the Council species by name. Vraxian ships, Sarkoth commanders, Kilrathi assault forces, all of them, working together to exterminate humanity. The last entry was from a soldier named Danny Cruz. He wrote that his squad was the last one alive on New Boston. They were sealing themselves in this bunker with all the records they could save. They hoped that someday, somehow someone would find the truth and share it with the galaxy. They told the universe we destroyed ourselves, Danny had written, but that is a lie. They murdered us because they feared us. They feared our potential, our rapid advancement, our refusal to accept their old rules. If anyone finds this, please tell the truth. Let the galaxy know what really happened to Earth and her children. Sophie sat in the darkness of that ancient bunker, surrounded by the bones of the dead, and cried. She cried for people she had never known, for a species that the galaxy had forgotten, and then she started copying every file she could find to her portable storage device. Back in space, Jake Morrison was about to learn the same terrible truth in a very different way. The human derelict ship suddenly blazed with light. Power surged through systems that should have been dead for millennia. Jake barely had time to shout a warning before his shields flared under impact, but his ship was not destroyed. Instead, weapons fire from the ancient vessel precisely destroyed his communication array, his weapons, and his engines. His ship was left floating, helpless but intact. A message appeared on every screen on the bridge. It was in perfect Vraxian language. We remember what you did. We remember Earth. We remember our colonies. We remember the billions you murdered. You told the galaxy we were extinct. You told them we destroyed ourselves. But some of us survived. We fled to the darkness between stars. We hid. We rebuilt. We waited. And now, after 3,000 years, we are coming home. Tell your council. Tell them that humanity remembers. Tell them that judgment is coming. The message ended. The ancient ship's power died again, going dark and silent. But Jake knew it had served its purpose. It was a warning shot. A message delivered across the void of time. Krell was staring at the screen in shock. That is impossible. Humans are extinct. Everyone knows this. Jake looked at his crippled ship, at the ancient human vessel floating nearby, and felt fear grip his heart. I do not think they are extinct anymore, he said quietly. And I think we are in very serious trouble. The Galactic Council chamber was filled with noise and panic. Representatives from 7 major species argued loudly, their voices echoing off the tall stone walls. At the center of the chaos sat Chancellor Vornis, a Sarkoth whose reptilian face remained calm despite the crisis unfolding around him. He was old, very old. Old enough to remember things that younger generations only knew from history books. Old enough to remember the truth about humanity. Order, Vornis hissed, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The chamber fell silent. We will address this situation with logic, not fear. Logic? Shouted Ambassador Trell, a young Vraxian who had only held his position for 5 years. Chancellor, a human ship destroyed one of our patrol vessels. Humans, a species that has been extinct for 3,000 years. The ship was disabled, not destroyed, Vornis corrected. And the humans are clearly not extinct. That much is obvious. A Kilrathi representative clicked her mandibles nervously. But how? Our records show that Earth was destroyed. The human colonies were eliminated. How could any have survived? Vornis knew the answer, but he would not speak it aloud. Not yet. The truth was dangerous. 3,000 years ago, when he was young, humanity had been spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. They were a new species, fresh to space travel, but they learned impossibly fast. What took other species 10,000 years to develop, humans achieved in mere centuries. They were adaptable, creative, and worst of all, They refused to follow the Council's established order. They questioned everything. They challenged old traditions. They formed alliances with species the Council had spent millennia keeping under control. So the Council had made a decision. Humanity had to be stopped before they became too powerful. The attack had been coordinated across all human space simultaneously. It was meant to be complete, total, absolute. But clearly, some had escaped. "We must increase military patrols immediately," Vornis said firmly. "Double our fleet presence in all border regions. If humans survived, they will be hiding in the outer territories beyond our normal patrol routes. Should we not tell the public?" asked another representative. "The people deserve to know." "No," Vornis said sharply. "We will contain this quietly. There is no need to cause panic over a few survivors in ancient ships." But even as he spoke, Vornis knew it was already too late for quiet containment. Sophie Grant sat in a detention cell, her hands bound with energy restraints. Council security forces had raided the mining colony 3 hours after she transmitted the bunker data to her friend Kate, who worked on a communications relay station. Sophie had known they would come for her, but she had needed to make sure the information got out first. The cell door opened and a Sarkoth officer entered. His scales were dark green and his eyes were cold. "You have caused significant trouble, human sympathizer," he said. "Human sympathizer?" Sophie laughed bitterly. "I am just telling the truth. Your council murdered billions of innocent people and then lied about it for 3,000 years. You know nothing about ancient history," the officer hissed. "You do not understand the decisions that had to be made." "I understand murder," Sophie shot back. "I understand genocide. I read their logs. I saw their final messages. They were begging for mercy and you gave them none." The officer's face twitched with anger. "They were dangerous, unpredictable. They would have disrupted everything." "They were people," Sophie said quietly. "Just people trying to live their lives. And you killed them for being different." The officer left without another word, sealing the cell door behind him. Sophie sat alone in the darkness, but she was not afraid. She had done what she needed to do. The data was out there now, spreading across communication networks, being copied and shared. The Council could arrest her, but they could not stop the truth. Far beyond the edge of Council space, in a region of darkness that appeared empty on all star charts, Captain Ryan Hayes stood on the bridge of his ship, the Defiance. He was watching a tactical display that showed 17 targets scattered across Council territory. Ryan was 28 years old, but his family had been living in space for over 100 generations. He had never seen Earth except in old videos and photographs. He had been born on a generation ship, the Perseverance, along with 3,000 other people who had never known a planet's surface. His people had survived for 3,000 years by staying hidden, moving constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be discovered. They had scavenged technology from dozens of species. They had adapted, improved, and built new things that the Council had never imagined. And now, finally, they were ready to come home. "All ships report ready, Captain," said his tactical officer, a woman named Beth Turner. She was the same age as Ryan, also born in space, also raised on stories of lost Earth. "Good," Ryan said. "Execute the plan. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and get out before they can respond." The Defiance and 5 other human ships jumped to faster-than-light travel. They emerged near a Council military supply depot in a remote system. The attack lasted exactly 7 minutes. Human weapons, developed in secret over millennia, tore through Council shields like they were paper. The depot was destroyed, but Ryan made sure to leave survivors. He needed them to spread the word. Before jumping away, Ryan broadcast a message to the surviving Council ships. "You tried to erase us. You failed. Earth remembers." Over the next 3 days, Ryan's small fleet hit 16 more targets. Each attack was surgical and precise. They destroyed military installations but avoided civilian casualties. This was not about random destruction. This was about sending a message. The galaxy was beginning to listen. On the planet Kelmar, a mining world controlled by the Council, workers gathered in secret to discuss the data that Sophie Grant had transmitted. The miners were Trell, a species that the Council had conquered 2,000 years ago. They had been forced to work for Council interests ever since. "Is it true?" asked one miner, a young man named Paul. "Did the Council really murder the humans?" An older miner named Vec nodded slowly. "I remember my grandmother telling stories. She said humans were kind to the Trail. They treated us as equals. The council did not like that. If they did this to humans, Paul said quietly, what would they do to us if we tried to be free? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Around the galaxy, on dozens of worlds, similar conversations were happening. Species that had been conquered, subjugated, or forced into the council system were asking the same questions. And the answers they found were not comforting. Chancellor Vornis watched reports flooding in from across council space. Protests on Kelmar, riots on 3 other mining worlds, military defections among species who felt the council had betrayed their trust, and worst of all, the human attacks continued, each one demonstrating technology that should not exist. He called an emergency meeting of the council's inner circle, the handful of leaders who knew the complete truth about humanity's destruction. They are more advanced than we anticipated, admitted Fleet Marshal Thorax, the Kilrathi military commander. Our intelligence suggested they would be using 3,000-year-old technology. But their weapons are far beyond that. They have been innovating, improving, developing new systems we have never seen. How is that possible? Demanded another council member. They have been hiding in empty space. They should have no resources, no industrial capacity. They are human, Vornis said quietly. That is how it is possible. We forgot what made them dangerous in the first place. They adapt. They survive. They innovate when pressed to the edge of extinction. Then what do? Thorax asked. Vornis was silent for a long moment. Finally he spoke. We do what we should have done 3,000 years ago. We negotiate. We offer them terms. A place on the council, reparations, anything they want. Because if we fight them now, I fear we will lose. But even as he said it, Vornis knew it was probably too late for peace. Humanity had spent 3,000 years in darkness, remembering what had been done to them. That kind of memory did not fade. That kind of anger did not forgive. The war had already begun, and the council was going to learn a hard lesson. You could try to destroy humanity, but if even a handful survived, they would come back stronger than before. Admiral Lisa Cross stood before the viewport of her flagship, the Vengeance, and stared at the stars. She was 53 years old, and she had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Her grandmother had been an admiral too, commanding the human fleet in hiding. Her mother had held the same position. Now it was Lisa's turn to lead humanity home. The Vengeance was enormous, larger than any council warship by a significant margin. It had been built over 200 years, constructed in secret in the dark space between stars. Thousands of people had worked on it, knowing they would never live to see it completed, but they had built it anyway, because they believed their descendants would need it. Admiral, all fleet groups report ready, said Commander Pete Logan, her second in command. He was younger than Lisa, only 35, but he was one of the best tactical minds in the fleet. We have 543 ships standing by, the largest human fleet assembled in 3,000 years. Lisa nodded slowly. 543 ships sounded impressive, but the council had tens of thousands. Humanity could not win through numbers. They would have to win through skill, tactics, and the advantage of surprise. Send the signal, Lisa ordered. Begin Operation Homecoming. Across the darkness of space, human ships that had been hiding for generations powered up their engines and began moving toward council territory. After 3,000 years of hiding, humanity was finally ready to reveal itself to the galaxy. Fleet Marshal Thorax of the Kilrathi studied the reports on his desk with growing concern. He had been a military officer for 40 years and he had never seen anything like this. The human attacks were too coordinated, too precise. They struck exactly where it hurt most, targeting supply lines, communication relays, and military bases while avoiding civilian populations. They are testing us, Thorax said to his staff. Each attack is designed to learn how we respond, how fast we can deploy forces, what our response protocols are. But why? Asked one of his junior officers. If they have this kind of capability, why not strike at our core worlds directly? Thorax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. It was a good question. The humans clearly had advanced technology. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful. So why were they being so careful? Then it hit him. They are not just fighting a war, Thorax said quietly. They are sending a message. They want the galaxy to see them as liberators, not conquerors. Every attack they make is clean, surgical. They leave survivors. They avoid civilian casualties. They are showing the galaxy that they are better than we are. The realization made Thorax feel cold inside. The Council had won the last war through brutality and overwhelming force. But humanity was fighting a different kind of war. They were fighting for hearts and minds as much as territory. Increase patrols in all sectors, Thorax ordered, and send word to the Chancellor. We have a serious problem. Sophie Grant had been in detention for 5 days when the cell door opened unexpectedly. She looked up to see not a guard, but a young Trell male wearing mining clothes. His name was Paul, and he had a nervous but determined look on his face. "How did you get in here?" Sophie asked in surprise. "The guards are Trell," Paul said quickly. "They read the data you sent out. They know the truth about what the Council did to your people. Some of us want to help." Sophie stood up. "You are risking everything. If the Council finds out—" "They already found out what they did to humans," Paul interrupted. "If they would do that to a species like yours, what would they do to us? We have been slaves for 2,000 years. Maybe it is time we stopped being afraid." Paul led Sophie through corridors that she did not recognize. Other Trell workers helped them, creating distractions, blocking security cameras, opening doors. Within an hour, Sophie was on a transport ship leaving the station. "Where will you go?" Paul asked as they prepared to separate. "To find the humans," Sophie said. "To help them however I can. Your people deserve freedom, and the Council needs to answer for what they have done." As Sophie's transport disappeared into space, Paul returned to the mining station. He knew there would be consequences for helping her escape. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he had done something that mattered. Ryan Hayes and his crew were drifting in deep space, their ship powered down to minimal levels to avoid detection. They were waiting for the right moment to strike their next target when the sensors picked up something unusual. "Captain, we have a small transport on approach," Beth Turner reported. "Single occupant. They are broadcasting a human distress code." Ryan felt his pulse quicken. A human distress code? That was impossible. All surviving humans were accounted for in the fleet. "What kind of ship?" "Council design, but it has been modified. And Captain, the distress code is authentic. It matches our encryption protocols exactly." Ryan made a decision. "Bring them in, carefully. Be ready for a trap." 20 minutes later, Sophie Grant stood on the bridge of the Defiance, exhausted and dirty but very much alive. Ryan stared at her in amazement. "You are not one of ours," he said. "How do you know our codes?" Sophie pulled out her data storage device. "I found a bunker on a mining colony. A human bunker, sealed for 3,000 years. It had logs, records, everything, including your military codes and protocols. I transmitted it all across the galaxy. The whole Council knows the truth now." Ryan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. For 3,000 years, humanity had lived with the knowledge of what had been done to them. But the rest of the galaxy had believed the Council's lies. Now finally, the truth was public. "You just started a revolution," Ryan said softly. Sophie smiled tiredly. "Good. They deserve one." Ryan's ship jumped to rendezvous with a Council science vessel that his intelligence had identified as a high-valued target. When they intercepted it, they discovered something that made Ryan's blood boil. The science vessel was carrying artifacts. Human artifacts, art, music, personal items, even preserved bodies, all taken from Earth and her colonies 3,000 years ago. The Council had been studying humanity in secret for millennia, trying to understand what made them so adaptable, so creative, so dangerous. Ryan ordered his crew to secure everything. They found data files containing studies of human psychology, human innovation, human military tactics. The Council had been obsessed with humanity even after supposedly wiping them out. But the worst discovery was in the ship's main lab. There, preserved in stasis, were video recordings from the final days of the human colonies. Ryan forced himself to watch them. He saw families running from Council soldiers. He saw children crying as their parents tried to protect them. He saw brave men and women making last stands to buy time for evacuation ships, and he heard them begging for mercy. The recordings showed Council ships ignoring surrender signals. They showed orbital bombardments of cities. They showed escape ships being shot down. It was systematic, organized genocide, and the Council had recorded it all. Ryan's hands shook as he copied the files. "Send this to Admiral Cross," he ordered, "and send copies to every independent news network in the galaxy. Everyone needs to see this." His crew worked quickly, and within hours the videos were spreading across thousands of worlds. Civilians throughout Council space watched in horror as the truth of what their governments had done was laid bare for all to see. On 36 worlds, protests turned into riots. On 2 Council member worlds, local governments withdrew their support from the central authority. The Council's carefully maintained image of peaceful cooperation began to crack and crumble. Admiral Lisa Cross received Ryan's transmission and watched the videos in silence. When they ended, she sat quietly for several minutes. Then she stood and addressed her crew. "For 3,000 years we have lived in darkness," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We have kept our culture alive through stories and memories. We have raised children who never saw Earth, never knew home. We did this because we believed that someday justice would come. Today, that day has arrived. Prepare the fleet for full assault. We are not hiding anymore. We are going home, and nothing is going to stop us." Throughout the human fleet, men and women who had spent their entire lives in space prepared for the battle of their existence. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and attacking an enemy that controlled thousands of worlds. But they were humanity, and humanity had never been very good at accepting defeat. The ghost of Earth was about to become very real, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The attack came at dawn, Council Standard Time, across 17 different star systems simultaneously. Admiral Lisa Cross had planned it perfectly, striking at military installations that were crucial to Council defense networks, but far enough from civilian populations to minimize innocent casualties. The human fleet moved like a coordinated dance. Ships appeared from faster-than-light travel, unleashed devastating attacks, and disappeared before Council forces could properly respond. Their weapons technology was centuries ahead of what the Council used. Shields that should have held against any known weapon collapsed under human fire. Armor that was considered impenetrable melted like ice under a hot sun. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Lisa watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Every target was hit within the first 10 minutes. Not a single human ship had been lost. Phase 1 complete, Commander Pete Logan reported. All strike groups reporting successful hits. Council forces are scrambling to respond, but they are confused. They do not know where we will strike next. Good, Lisa said. Proceed to Phase 2. Let them see what happens when humanity stops hiding. Fleet Marshal Thorax watched his command center dissolve into chaos. Reports flooded in from across Council space. 17 installations destroyed or severely damaged. Communication networks disrupted. Supply lines cut. And worst of all, not a single human ship had been successfully engaged. "How are they doing this?" demanded one of his senior officers. "We have faster-than-light tracking systems. We should be able to predict where they will appear." Thorax studied the attack patterns carefully. Something about them seemed familiar. Then he remembered his history lessons from decades ago, before he had become a senior officer. He remembered reading about human military tactics from before they were supposedly extinct. The humans had a concept they called blitzkrieg, a lightning war. Fast movement, overwhelming force at specific points, and constantly keeping the enemy off balance. But they had refined it, improved it, made it work in 3-dimensional space combat. "They are not fighting the way we fight," Thorax said quietly. "We fight for territory, for control of space. They are fighting to destroy our ability to wage war. They are targeting infrastructure, not just ships." "Then how do we stop them?" his officer asked. Thorax did not have an answer. The Council military had not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. They had grown comfortable, complacent. Their ships were designed to intimidate and control, not to fight against an enemy with superior technology and better tactics. "Send word to all fleet commanders," Thorax ordered. "Do not engage human ships directly unless absolutely necessary. Focus on defending critical installations, and may whatever gods you believe in help us all." Sophie Grant sat in a small room on a rebel base, speaking into a camera. Around her were representatives from a dozen different species, all of them part of the growing resistance movement against the Council. Her message was being broadcast to thousands of worlds, spreading through underground networks and pirate communication relays. "My name is Sophie Grant," she said clearly. "I am a human sympathizer, and I am not ashamed of that fact. I have seen the evidence of what the Council did 3,000 years ago. I have read the logs of dying soldiers. I have seen the videos of families being murdered. The Council told us that humans destroyed themselves, but that was a lie. The Council destroyed humanity because they were afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of innovation, afraid of species that would not accept their authority without question. She paused, letting her words sink in. But humanity survived. Against all odds, they survived in the darkness between stars. And now they have returned. Not for conquest, not for revenge alone, but for justice. The Council made a choice 3,000 years ago to murder billions of innocent people. Now they must face the consequences of that choice. Sophie looked directly into the camera. To everyone watching this, I ask you a simple question. If the Council would do this to humanity, what would they do to you? How many other species have they erased from history? How many other crimes have they hidden? It is time for the truth. It is time for justice. It is time for change. The message ended, but its impact rippled across the galaxy. On mining worlds and agricultural planets, on factory stations and research outposts, people who had been oppressed by the Council for generations began to rise up. They had seen the evidence. They had heard the truth. And they were done being afraid. Ryan Hayes led a strike team into a Council research facility in the Belgar system. His mission was to retrieve more data about what the Council had been hiding. What he found there made him sick to his stomach. The facility was dedicated to biological research, specifically research on human DNA and neural patterns. The Council had been trying to replicate humanity's innovative capacity, their adaptability, their rapid learning abilities. They had been running experiments for thousands of years. They were obsessed with us, Beth Turner said in disgust as they downloaded the research files. Even after trying to kill us all, they could not stop studying us. Ryan found a particular file that caught his attention. It was a report from a Sarkoth scientist written 50 years ago. The scientist admitted that despite millennia of research, the Council still did not understand what made humans special. They could map human DNA, study human brain patterns, but they could not replicate the spark that made humanity so adaptable. The report concluded with a chilling observation. Humanity's greatest strength is also what makes them most dangerous. They do not accept limitations. When faced with an impossible problem, they do not give up. They find a way, or they create a new way. This makes them unpredictable and therefore a permanent threat to galactic stability. Ryan copied the file and transmitted it to the fleet. They destroyed us because they could not understand us, he said to his crew. They were afraid of what we represented. Change, progress, a future that did not look like their past. The strike team extracted successfully, leaving the research facility in ruins behind them. But Ryan made sure to rescue one thing, a collection of human artifacts that had been stored there. Personal items from Earth, things that had belonged to people 3,000 years ago. He would make sure they returned home where they belonged. Admiral Lisa Cross stood before a holographic display showing the entire theater of war. Red markers showed Council strongpoints. Blue markers showed human positions. Green markers showed rebel-controlled territory. The green was spreading. We are receiving requests for support from resistance movements in 47 different systems, Pete Logan reported. They are asking for weapons, tactical support, and recognition. Lisa made a decision that would change the course of the war. Granted, all of it. Send them weapons, send them tactical advisors, and broadcast to every world in Council space that humanity recognizes their right to self-determination. We are not here to replace the Council with a new empire. We are here to end empires altogether. It was a bold statement, and Lisa knew it would have consequences. But humanity had not suffered for 3,000 years just to become the new oppressors. They had survived to create something better. Chancellor Vornis finally accepted what he had been trying to deny. The Council was losing, not just militarily, but morally. The truth about humanity's destruction had shattered the Council's credibility. Species that had supported them for thousands of years were withdrawing their allegiance. The military was stretched thin, trying to contain both human attacks and internal rebellions. He called for a vote among the Council leadership. The measure was simple: offer humanity a formal peace treaty, including full reparations and a seat on the Council. The vote was close, but it passed. Vornis authorized the transmission of peace terms to the human fleet. Admiral Lisa Cross received the offer and read it carefully. Reparations, a seat on the Council. Recognition of human sovereignty. On paper, it was everything humanity should want. But Lisa thought about the videos she had seen. She thought about 3,000 years of suffering. She thought about the generations who had lived and died in darkness, never seeing home. And she thought about all the other species the Council had oppressed, all the crimes they had committed and hidden. She composed her response personally. It was short and direct. Chancellor Vornis, humanity does not want a seat at your table. We want to flip the table over. The Council system is corrupt, built on genocide and oppression. We will not join it. We will dismantle it. You had 3,000 years to make things right. That time has passed. What comes next is justice, not negotiation. Lisa sent the message and turned to her crew. All ships advance to Phase 3. Target the Council capital system. It is time to end this. Across the galaxy, the human fleet began moving toward the heart of Council power. They were joined by thousands of rebel ships representing dozens of species who had suffered under Council rule. This was no longer just humanity's war. It had become a revolution. Fleet Marshal Thorax prepared his forces for the final defense of the Council capital. He knew deep in his heart that they would probably lose. But he would do his duty anyway. Not because he believed in the Council anymore, but because he was a soldier and soldiers fought. He watched the sensor displays as the human fleet approached. The Council capital world of Terminus Prime hung in space like a jewel, surrounded by defensive stations and thousands of warships. It was the heart of galactic government, home to billions of beings from hundreds of species. For 3,000 years it had been the center of civilization, the place where laws were made and power was held. Admiral Lisa Cross stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and looked at it through the viewport. She felt no hatred, only a deep sadness. So many people down there had no idea what their government had done. They were innocent, just trying to live their lives. Admiral, we are receiving multiple hails, Pete Logan reported, some from Council forces offering surrender. Others from civilian authorities begging us not to attack the planet. Lisa had expected this. Open a channel to all forces in this system, Council and civilian both. When the channel opened, Lisa spoke clearly and calmly. This is Admiral Lisa Cross of the human fleet. We are not here to destroy Terminus Prime. We are not here to harm civilians. We are here to end a government that committed genocide and then lied about it for 3,000 years. To all Council military forces, stand down. We will not fire on you if you do not fire on us. To all civilians, stay in your homes. This will be over soon. Fleet Marshal Thorax received the message and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He knew the Council's crimes. He had read the evidence that humanity had spread across the galaxy. His government had murdered billions of innocent people and hidden it behind lies. He could not defend that. He would not defend that. All Council forces under my command, Thorax broadcast on military channels, stand down. Do not engage the human fleet. What the Council did to humanity 3,000 years ago was genocide. I will not sacrifice more lives defending those crimes. The war is over. Across the system, Council ships powered down their weapons. Some captains refused the order and tried to fight, but they were quickly disabled by human ships. Within 2 hours, the Council capital system was secured without a major battle. Lisa led a boarding team to the Council chambers, where Chancellor Vornis and the other senior leaders waited. The reptilian chancellor looked old and tired, but he held his head high as Lisa entered. You have won, Admiral, Vornis said simply. What happens now? Now you answer for your crimes, Lisa replied. Not just to humanity, but to every species you have oppressed. You will stand trial before representatives from across the galaxy. You will face justice, Vornis laughed bitterly. Justice? Is that what you call this? You have destroyed the galactic order. There will be chaos now, wars between species, suffering. Maybe, Lisa agreed. But it will be honest chaos. Better that than a false peace built on hidden genocide. The Council leadership was taken into custody. Within days, a new assembly was called, with representatives from every species in known space, not just the powerful ones. Sophie Grant helped organize it, working with rebels and independent worlds to create something that had never existed before. A truly representative galactic government. Ryan Hayes finally got his chance to go home. His ship, the Defiance, was part of the first wave of human vessels that entered the Sol system after 3,000 years. As they approached Earth, Ryan felt emotions he could not put into words. The planet was damaged. The great cities were ruins. Radiation still lingered in some areas, but life had survived. The oceans were still blue. Clouds still drifted across the atmosphere. Plants had reclaimed much of what humanity had built. It is still beautiful, Beth Turner said softly, standing beside him on the bridge. Ryan nodded, unable to speak. His grandmother had told him stories about Earth, passed down through generations. Blue skies, green forests, the smell of rain. He had thought they were just stories, myths about a lost paradise, but they were real. Earth was real. The Defiance landed in what had once been called North America. Ryan was the first to step out onto the soil, feeling real gravity for the first time in his life, breathing unfiltered air. He knelt down and touched the ground, feeling dirt between his fingers. "We are home," he whispered. "Finally, we are home." Other human ships landed across the planet. Thousands of people who had been born in space finally stood on the world their ancestors had left behind. Some cried. Some laughed. Some just stood in silence, overwhelmed by the moment. Ryan and his crew found a place near what had once been a major city. They planted a flag, not to claim conquest but to mark return. Then they began the work of rebuilding. It would take decades, maybe centuries, to restore Earth to what it had been, but they had time now. They were home, and they were not hiding anymore. Sophie Grant stood before the new Galactic Assembly and spoke to thousands of representatives from across known space. She had become a symbol of the revolution, the person who had risked everything to expose the truth. "We stand at a crossroads," she said. "The old council is gone, destroyed by its own crimes. We can build something better, or we can repeat the same mistakes. The choice is ours." A Trail representative stood up. "How do we prevent this from happening again? How do we make sure no species is ever treated the way humans were?" Sophie had thought about this question for weeks. "We start by telling the truth, all of it. We do not hide uncomfortable histories. We do not bury our mistakes. We face them, learn from them, and make sure future generations understand what happened and why it must never happen again." She gestured to a memorial that had been constructed outside the assembly building. It was a wall of black stone, and carved into it were names. Billions of names. Every human who had died in the Council's attack 3,000 years ago, recovered from old records and databases. "That memorial is not just for humans," Sophie continued. "It is for everyone who has ever been oppressed, everyone who has ever been told their life did not matter. We will add more names to it from other species, other crimes. We will remember them all, and we will make sure their deaths meant something." The Assembly voted to create new laws, new structures of government. No single species could hold absolute power. No government could classify genocides as state secrets. Truth and transparency would be the foundation of the new order. It was not perfect. There were arguments, conflicts, species that refused to participate. But it was a start. Chancellor Vornis and the other council leaders stood trial before a court made up of judges from 50 different species. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The videos, the logs, the records that humanity had preserved and shared. Vornis did not try to defend his actions. He simply said, "We did what we thought was necessary for galactic stability. We were wrong." The court debated for days about the appropriate punishment. Some wanted execution. Others wanted life imprisonment. But Admiral Lisa Cross surprised everyone with her recommendation. "Let them live," she said. "Let them watch as we build something better than what they created. Let them see the galaxy thrive without their control. That will be a greater punishment than death." The court agreed. Vornis and the other council leaders were sentenced to witness restoration. They would live, but they would spend the rest of their lives watching the new galaxy being built, seeing proof that their crimes had been for nothing. Years passed. Earth slowly healed. Human cities rose from the ruins, blending old architecture with new technology. Other species came to visit to see the legendary homeworld that had become a myth. They found a people who had survived impossible odds, who had kept their culture alive in darkness, who had come home against all probability. Admiral Lisa Cross retired from military service and became Earth's representative to the new Galactic Assembly. She worked alongside Sophie Grant and representatives from dozens of other species to build the framework for lasting peace. One day, Lisa stood at the human memorial with Ryan Hayes. They looked at the billions of names carved in stone, representing the people who had died so long ago. "Do you think they would be proud of us?" Ryan asked quietly. Lisa thought about the question carefully. "I think they would be proud that we remembered them, that we came home, that we did not let their deaths be meaningless." Ryan nodded. He had a daughter now, born on Earth. She would grow up knowing blue skies and green grass. She would never know the inside of a generation ship, never spend her life hiding in darkness. That alone made everything worthwhile. We did what we said we would do, Ryan said. We kept the promise. Lisa smiled. Yes, we kept the promise. The galaxy moved forward into an uncertain future. There would be challenges, conflicts, disagreements, but there would also be truth, justice, and the knowledge that even the most powerful government could not erase a people from existence if they refused to be erased. Humanity had returned from the darkness. They had faced their oppressors and won. They had reclaimed their home and helped free an entire galaxy from tyranny. And they had proven, once and for all, that you could try to destroy humans. You could scatter them across the stars. You could force them to hide for 3,000 years, but you could not kill their spirit. You could not break their determination. You could not make them forget who they were. Earth was no longer a myth. It was real, alive and thriving. Humanity had come home, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The story of Earth's return would be told for thousands of years past.